As we move forward into the next 10 years, well, one guy is already on the top of my list. I'd be surprised if he doesn't stay there. And we all know who that is. What is up, Bills Mafia? We have 354 days until the Buffalo Bills win Super Bowl 57, and this channel is going to document every day leading up to that glorious moment. I've been around for a long time, too long. Hate to admit it, but the Buffalo Bills have been in my life for over 40 years. And I decided for this video, I'm going to tell you what my favorite player was from each and every decade since the Bills came into existence in 1960. So we're going to start there, 1960. I wasn't born until 1969, so I don't really remember anything about the Bills in the 60s, but I've heard stories. And so with that, I'm going to pick my favorite player from the 60s, and that is Cookie Gilchrist. Why? I like the name. And he apparently was a pretty big part of the Buffalo Bills back then. But Cookie Gilchrist started his career with the Cleveland Browns, which is kind of neat. He went off to Canada, where he played for Kitchener and Hamilton, Saskatchewan, Toronto. He bounced around the CFL, obviously, for a few years. And then he came to the Buffalo Bills in 1962. And then he was only with Buffalo for a couple years. Went off to Denver and Miami to finish off his career. Cookie Gilchrist, my 1960s favorite player. We go to 1970s. Again, I don't remember I don't remember any football in the 70s, actually. But I do know about the Bills in the 70s. They were horrible. They could not beat the Dolphins. They were 0 for 24 or something like that against the Dolphins. But there's one player only that you think about when you think about the Buffalo Bills from the 1970s, and that is O.J. Simpson, the Juice. Yes, horrible human being off the field, an amazing football player on the field. And here's a little bit of something interesting about O.J. Simpson from the 1970s. Of course, he was amazing. O.J. Simpson was 6 of 16 with 1 touchdown throwing the ball. All right, let's go to the 1980s. This is when I really started watching football. My first game that I watched was in the 1980s. And in the early 80s, I gained a lot of affection for the players there. We have Joe Ferguson, Jerry Butler, Frank Lewis. On the defensive side of the ball, we had Sherman White. We had Jim Haslett, Fred Smerlas. A lot of great iconic early 80s players. The one player that I identify with in the 1980s is Joe Cribbs. Love Joe Cribbs. He was only here for a few years, and then he went off to the USFL. But I don't know, just as a kid, I always wanted to be Joe Cribbs when I was playing football in the front yard. And the one game that I remember Joe Cribbs really going off in was the 1981 wild card game against the New York Jets. What a game. If you can, pull it up on YouTube and watch it. It was just fantastic. Joe Cribbs just killed the Jets that day, and he was an amazing player for Buffalo for a very short period of time, but he's my guy from the 1980s. Then we go to the 1990s, and of course, that's the Super Bowl teams. That's the teams that we all know, whether you were alive then or not. If you're a Bills fan, you know all about the Bills of the 90s. Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Don Beebe, James Lofton. Of course, on the defensive side of the ball, Bruce Smith, of course. You have Shane Conlon, Nate Odoms. The list goes on and on and on and on. But the player that I identify most with in the 90s is a guy named The Biscuit. You know who that is. Cornelius Bennett. I love the way Cornelius Bennett played. His motor was always going. Of course, we picked him up in a trade with the Colts. What a player he was. And I don't think there's much debate that if Bruce Smith did not have Cornelius Bennett lined up on the opposite side, Bruce would probably not have gotten 200 sacks over his career. Cornelius Bennett, absolutely amazing. Here's a couple statistics for you on Cornelius. He finished his career with 71.5 sacks, and he finished his career with the Bills with 52.5 sacks. He played a long time. And after playing in Buffalo, he went off to play for the Atlanta Falcons. And interestingly enough, he finished his career with the team that drafted him, the Indianapolis Colts. Off to the early 2000s now, and my favorite player is a tough one to pick because the Bills were, again, so bad in the early 2000s. But man, we had some really remarkable talent here in Buffalo. I mean, you got to think there was Drew Bledsoe, Eric Moulds, Peerless Price, Lee Evans. You had guys up and down on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball. But the guy that I identify with the most, again, wasn't here very long, but it was awesome when he was, and that is a linebacker, Takeo Spikes. The dude had the best name in football. Come on now. How can you not be a football player with a name like Takeo Spikes? Takeo Spikes was just a beast out there, and of course started his career with Cincinnati. And then I actually saw his last game live at the stadium when the Bills played Cincinnati, the last game of the year. And then the next year, Takeo came to Buffalo. The dude was just awesome to play. Just the enthusiasm he had on the field, the energy, and of course he had the biggest neck of any NFL player that has ever played the game. All right, from 2010 to 2020, we had some interesting players. We had some interesting seasons. No, we didn't. We didn't have any interesting seasons, but we had some interesting players and guys that, again, balled out week in and week out. And the one that comes to my mind is one that was just a superstar in the NFL. Again, didn't start his career in Buffalo, didn't finish his career in Buffalo, but while he was here, he was so much fun to watch. And for me, that guy, Mr. Shady, Mr. LeSean McCoy, is my favorite player from 2010 to 2020. Of course, started his career in Philadelphia and just recently finished his career. And as we move forward into the next 10 years, well, one guy is already on the top of my list. I'd be surprised if he doesn't stay there. And we all know who that is. That's right, your 2022 MVP and Super Bowl champion, Josh Allen. That's it for me. How about you guys? Who do you like? Would love to know. Comment below. For now, see you tomorrow.